welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Sarah Landenwich, author of the novel The Fire Concerto. Sarah, hi.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Of course. So I have a lot of questions. As we talked in our pre-interview, I don't know a lot about this history. So tell me first about your characters, Clara Bishop and Constantia Pleyel, and how their lives intertwine in this novel.
Sure. So this is a past-present narrative where, there's a storyline in the present and my protagonist, Clara Bishop, is investigating a mystery of the past. So, it's about a pianist named Clara Bishop who was a former child prodigy, but who gave up music when her hand and arm were badly burned in a fire. And she's working as a bartender in Austin, Texas, when her piano teacher dies and leaves her an unexpected inheritance, which is a 19th century metronome with a hidden message in its box. And Clara doesn't know why her teacher had this metronome or why she gave it to Clara, but she soon discovers that this is the long lost metronome of a famous romantic composer named Alexander Starza. And this metronome has been missing since his death in 1885 when he was killed by one of his pupils, a female pianist, Constantia Pleyel. Clara's trying to understand why she has this unusual bequest, what it all means, and so she takes a journey to Warsaw, where the composer lived and died, to try to uncover the truth about what really happened the night of his death.
So it's a very intriguing plot, and everything that comes to mind for me as someone who reads and writes historical fiction and history was how much of this is real, how much of it is fictionalized. Can you talk about what's fictionalized and more to the point, like why the parts that are fictionalized?
Sure. So all of it is fictionalized, but all of it is heavily informed by research into this period of time, in particular into the composer and the pianist. They are definitely built from real people of this time period. So I have a background in classical music. I was very serious about piano as a young person. And my favorite time period for music is the Romantic era, which is roughly the period between 1830 and 1900. So this is the time of like Chopin, Liszt, Brahms, the Schumanns, this great moment for the piano for music. And because I have all this knowledge about the composers of that time, I built my fictional composer, Alexander Starza, from a lot of what I knew about these various composers. But I wanted to build one that was fictional because it gives me as a writer so much more license to build a story like this. Because there is no, I mean, not, I was going to say, unfortunately, it's not unfortunate. There is no murder of a famous composer in history um, that I could have drawn from. But these characters were very much informed by my knowledge of this time.
What's interesting to me is we published a novel called The Education of Delhomme, and it's about Frédéric Chopin's piano tuner. The author created a piano tuner, and it turns into a bit of a mystery involving Eugene Francois Vidocq, and Litz is named in there as well. Um, I guess I wonder, could you talk more about this genre of fiction where we're bringing composers and music to life on the page? What are some of the challenges of it, and what's unique about that genre separate from other historical novels?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, that Chopin novel sounds really interesting. Um, I don't know that I see it as having any distinct difference from a lot of other historical fiction, other than the um, the barriers that some people have up against classical music. I think that there is a misconception of that classical music is kind of dull or for rich people or, exclusively high culture. And I think that those are barriers to finding an audience for books about classical music. Um, it's kind of like an image problem that classical music has. But in the writing, I mean, actually, I find classical music to be such rich fodder for story because so many of these composers were just outrageous people. They had larger than life personalities, larger than life problems, dramatic, you know, public meltdowns. So it's kind of fascinating actually to dig into that history as a writer and let your imagination go wild with it.
I think that's well said because I feel that kind of boundary to classical music myself. Uh, I think it doesn't have to be limited to just people who know and understand classical music to read this novel because it can appeal to for so many different reasons. I wonder if you can talk more about the challenges of the craft behind all this, because, as I said, it's a very intriguing plot. What was the process like for you coming up with all that and then balancing the history with the drama, with your classical music training and all those things?
Sure. Yeah. So for me, it was really difficult to figure out how to structure this story because, as I said, it's a past present narrative. And essentially, it follows three female pianists, one in the 19th century, the Constantia Pleyel, one in the early 20th, who is Clara's teacher, and then Clara, who's in the novel, is in 1997. And so at first, I started writing this as a braided narrative. And very quickly, it was apparent that this would be far too long to ever get published. Just because, juggling three stories, three time periods, that's pretty, it's huge, right? So I was trying to figure out how to tell the story without, ballooning this book out to 200,000 words. And I was kind of searching around for a structure. And I thought of one of the novels that I think is so masterfully told, which is Possession by A.S. Byatt. And in that novel, there are two Victorian scholars in, I think, 1986 who have just discovered a secret love affair between these two fictional Victorian poets. And in that story, the scholars of the present are trying to find out what happened with this affair and how no one knew about it and what became of it. And the way it's told is largely through a present lens that dips into the past via texts like letters, journals, etc., and then just a few actual perspective shifts into that past. And I was like, that is the perfect structure for this book as well. It allows me to go through all of those different time periods without having to actually, devote whole chapters, whole parts of a book to a different perspective. And it was really hard to figure out where everything should go, how it should be arranged. But once it fell into place, it kind of elegantly enabled the story to unfold naturally without a lot of lag.
Was that like a light bulb moment for you, or was it something you were actively searching for?
I was searching for it for sure. Because to me, as a writer, the most difficult part of a novel is the structure. And once you find the structure, everything from there kind of like I said, unfolds easily. But if you don't have the right package for the story, it can either become very unwieldy or very slow. Um, and so I was searching for the structure, and kind of what I was doing, I was like looking at my bookshelf, and then books I really liked that had a historic element, I was like taking them off the shelf and literally going chapter by chapter. How is this working? How am I gaining all this information that I need to understand multiple timelines at once? And Possession, I think, does it the best.
Well, that's really interesting just to hear the in get an inside look of what it means to actually figure out how to lay out a novel and get it right, and you have to go back and see how other people did it. So that's pretty interesting. I want to ask you about musical ancestry. You write about that on your website. I've never
Hmm.
heard the term. It seems like it's not necessarily a valid thing. Can you tell us what it is and what
Absolutely.
your musical ancestry is?
Yeah, so musical ancestry is this idea of tracing your pedagogical lineage. So, in other words, your teaching line. And in classical music, this is something that exists, okay, where you say, "Oh, well, my teacher's teacher's teacher was a student of Franz Liszt." Okay? And so then therefore I am a quote musical descendant of Franz Liszt, which I am, okay? Um, and it's kind of used as some kind of silly way of distinction, right? Like, I think the idea is that some of the greatness of this figure of the past has been passed down the line of teachers, and that you have absorbed some of it as well. I do not understand like how this is a thing that anyone would ever buy. But it's an idea. I don't think it's something people put a lot of stock into, but it's certainly something that people discuss. And to me, um, it was a really interesting way to conceive of a novel. I've never seen the idea of musical ancestry explored in literature. And it's actually, in my opinion, like a very cool unifying motif, because the women in my book are not related, but they are connected via this line of teachers that they came down. And in my opinion, greatness cannot be passed down. Um, I do think teachers are enormously influential, and like a great teacher can certainly make a great influence on your life. But I don't think necessarily that your teacher's teacher and their teacher has anything to do with that at that point, right? It's really about that relationship from one teacher to one pupil. But as an organizing principle in a book, to connect these unrelated women by the teachers that they have had, and then when they themselves have become teachers, and passing down, in this case, some of the trauma that um, was initiated by that initial relationship with the 19th century composer is really interesting, at least to
Well,
me.
yeah, I mean, that's another great craft tool that you've just pointed to, a unifying motif, as you called it. What's interesting is you're talking about it. I'm thinking, in a sports analogy as a coaching tree. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but
Sure, same idea.
yeah.
Yes. So it's not, I mean, I don't think anybody like puts any stock in it, but certainly people talk about it, right? So there's some kind of belief system underlying that.
Mhm. Well, you've talked about teachers. You yourself are a teacher. I'm curious, what that experience is like for you teaching others how to write, and then how that informs your own writing.
Sure. Yeah. So I taught community college for 10 years, community college English. I haven't gone back. I had a baby and I haven't gone back since then, but I will because it's teaching, I think, is like part of my vocation in life. But teaching writing really influenced the way that I write because I think, you know, as a reader, as a writer, it's easy to get lost in the echo chamber of the readers and writers that you particularly are gravitating to or influenced by. Um, and then when you throw a bunch of students into the mix with all of their various interests and all of their various writing styles, it really kind of explodes um, the framework for you as a person. Because you have, 15 students in the room, all of whom have varying interest levels and experiences, and they want to write different stuff. And it makes the whole room have to expand a little bit. And for me as a writer, just seeing how different people view the world is so important. And there's no better way to do that than through a student because you really get to know them for a brief time, a semester. You get to know their work and you can see a little bit about how they see the world. And I feel like that's one of the great benefits of writing in general is gaining another perspective. But when you're the teacher and you have to really engage with it, it is a growth. Um, and yeah, my students make me grow quite a bit.
That's wonderful. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong. This is your debut novel.
Hmm.
Can you give us maybe a brief summary of your path to publication for this novel and what you've learned along the way?
I can give you a summary, but I don't know how brief it is. um, yes. So the first thing I'll say is that this is my debut novel, but it is not my first novel. I tried to get another novel published for many years before this one. And so part of my publication path is a long road of rejection, which is the norm. Um, but I always feel like it's important for everyone to acknowledge that and know that because so many writers get so dejected by the rejection that they might give up on their work, and I really don't want anybody to do that. Um, so I tried to get that novel published for a long time, and essentially what happened is I had a lot of interest from agents. I think I had like 35 requests for the manuscript, which is pretty good. And all of them were like, I really like this, but I think you should change X, Y, and Z. The problem was the X, Y, and Z was different for literally all of these people. And at that point, I was like, okay, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do a mixture of this and that? And it ended up being just so frustrating and also um, discouraging because I tried to do a lot of different things that people wanted me to do, and none of them were the right thing. You can't write a book according to someone else's vision, it does not work. And so I spent a lot of time stuck in this revising and resubmitting phase for that book, and it still did not get accepted by an agent. And I was really, really dejected about it. And I started writing this book, The Fire Concerto, kind of in the slough of that feeling, you know. But one of the important things that it gave me was a sense that I'm tired of listening to the critics. I'm tired of other people telling me what it should be. I'm going to write this book for myself. And truly, like months into writing this book, I knew that this book would get published. It just had it just had that energy, it had Um, it wasn't effortless. I don't think writing is ever effortless, but it flowed out of me in this way that I was like, I knew that I was writing the book for myself and not with someone over my shoulder saying, "Oh, this part wouldn't get published or this wouldn't appeal to a reader," that kind of thing.
Well, that's such a great message and such a great, so inspiring for writers out there to hear. Uh, so did you have to search for a new agent then? Did you go back out on submission, or did you have an agent from the first time around?
So from my first submissions, there were a lot of agents who said, "Well, if you write a different book, send it to me." And I thought, great, I have all of these invitations to submit. And I sent it to all those people, and not one of them took this book on. Um, but um, so then I sent out like cold queries, and um, the first agent I got for this book happened really fast. And notice I say first agent. That's not the agent that I currently have. So I sent out queries. I quickly got an agent and we started working together. And she was really excited about the book and said, let's take this on submission in 3 months. Like, let's do it. Um, and then a few weeks later said, okay, I think that you should revise this, a little bit more, and sent me a revision letter that was essentially, I think you should rewrite this book. And I was really, really devastated because I felt like I had already been through that with the first book. And I also felt like that wasn't a conversation that we had had when she offered me representation. So I spent a long time revising this book again, according to the input of a person who was trying, I know, to like make it marketable, but it wasn't necessarily with my creative vision. And we did that for a long time together, 19 months, until she said, I don't think this book is going to sell. And, basically fired me. And I was, again, once again, really devastated because not only at that point had I spent a lot of time in revision for a book that I felt like was more or less finished when I submitted it, but I felt, oh, no one's ever going to represent me if I got fired by my agent, because that's not something that you can like readily Google. I think a lot of people aren't going to admit to it. Here I am to tell you, writers out there, it does happen now that I've told this story to many writers, and um, it happens regularly where agents and writers part ways for various reasons. And you can still get an agent because in my case, after that agent, ended our relationship, I was like, well, I'm not going to give up on this book. You gave up on it. I'm not. So I sent out queries and I got 6 offers in 2 weeks. So, she didn't think it could sell, but it sold. And here I am talking to you.
Well, congratulations. Um, can you just talk for a moment just to see your book out there now, how proud you are?
Yes, it is truly amazing. To see, the words that you like have scribbled in your notebook and, crossed out, and then suddenly they're on like, here's my hardback book, like, opening it up is incredible. But the most fun thing for me actually was listening to the audiobook narrators, because to hear your own words in the mouth of, an actor performing them with, grace and expression, it was like, wow, that's what I wrote and you're saying it. And that was a really amazing moment.
I saw on your website that signed copies are available at Carmichael's bookstore. Can
Hmm.
you just give us a little detail on that partnership and why it's important?
Yeah, so Carmichael's bookstore is my local bookstore here in Louisville, Kentucky. They are fantastic and have been great supporters of this book. And they actually suggested it to me. They said some writers who live here have done this, and you might want to do it too. You can come in here whenever you're stopping by to get a book, and we'll hold copies for you that people have ordered from around the country, and you can just sign and personalize them, and we'll mail them out. And I was like, that's a fantastic idea. Um, and I think we actually have one already, which is cool because the book hasn't been released yet. Um, but I they I mean, local bookstores, I'm sure you also, you know, share this enthusiasm, but they are such a critical part of the reading and writing community, and the partnerships there are really special. So to have them, promoting my work and encouraging me as a writer has been really amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Are you working on a new manuscript?
I am, yes. So I am in the second draft of a dual timeline novel. This one, a more standard dual timeline, like back and forth, um, set in rural Indiana in 1881 and 2022. And
And
that's all
it's
I'll say.
okay. And it's about musically in not this
No,
time.
no.
Okay,
This
interesting.
was The Fire Concerto is my music novel, and that's my music novel.
Well, Sarah, congratulations once again on the Fire Concerto. Sounds like it was just such a long process for you, but you definitely put in all that work, and the craft is there, and I'm sure readers are going to love it. So, thanks for joining me. It's been wonderful to learn about you and about your book.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.